Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is the Commando Cast, a video cast about all things Star Wars Destiny. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando.
What do all of today's characters have in common? On paper, they looked amazing, but for whatever reason, either lack of partner or just the meta or environment they existed in, these characters never really performed on a level that matched our expectations. So in today's video, we're looking at the top 15 FFG Destiny characters that should have been good, but never quite made it. Hey there, Star Wars Destiny folks. Welcome back to Dice Commando and the Commando Cast. Thanks for checking in here on Destiny Friday. I hope your week has been well and you're going to get some games in this weekend. So yeah, kind of a fun cast day looking back at the FFG era of Destiny as it's, basically sunsetting, or at least, the sunset is on the horizon, so to speak. And looking at my top 15 characters that really should have been good. They came out on spoilers, like, oh, this guy's really good. I'm going to try to build with them. And they just never really made it into that, even like tier 1.5 range, right? So, as far as, my expectations go, I don't expect every character to be a tier 1 character, obviously. And then, you'll have the Destiny part of this. It's like, oh, this character looked really cool. So it's not just like the theme part or the character looked really good. It's somebody who, when they were spoiled, looked at it, were like, wow, this character looks like they're going to be really, really good. And for whatever reason, they just never quite made it. They just never quite made it. So let's open today, kind of a baseline. My number 15 is actually he was going to be farther down the list, but I kind of wanted to open with him because he's a good baseline. So number 15 is Legacies Finn. Right. So this guy's a beast, actually. Right. So at the time, his die was one of the highest value die. Right. Assuming you were getting the special off to its fullest extent, which that's the point. His die had the potential to be one of the best value die in the game at the time, right? It was a 2, little less than 2, but 2, 2, 3, 4, basically 4 2 sides, right? He was fantastic. That 12-16 price point made him a little rough. I mean, 11 health at the time was actually quite decent. This guy on paper looked fantastic. Part of the problem was he just never really found a buddy, right? And there was some Poe-Finn solidarity decks going around and stuff like that, and if this guy had come in at 15 points, at the time, he probably would have, him and Poe, the bro Dameron deck, right, probably would have dominated the meta, right? And because remember, the two-player set had come out just shortly before Legacies had, two-player set came out, just after EAW. So it had been out for a bit before Legacies dropped. But yeah, so it's completely reasonable why he wasn't at 15. Poe, Finn probably would have just been crazy good. Wouldn't have been a horrible thing, but yeah. So Finn, he just never quite made it into that, tier 1 stuff. I played with him a few times. A lot of people tried to make him work. Ran him with Rex, right, and it just never really punched into that top tier where I think we expected him to be. All right, next up is Rex, right? So I just kind of spoke to Rex a bit with Finn. But Rex is another one of these guys that, you look at his ability, and I want to be very clear here. I'm talking 11-14 Rex. I'm talking 11-14 FFG era Rex, not when he got his 10-13, because that completely changed everything, right? But even so, Rex at that 11-14 price point, back in the day, that's a pretty good price point. He had 11 health. His ability is phenomenal, right? Or at least in theory, on paper. There were a lot of battlefield control cards in Legacies block, specifically in coming out of Legacies itself. Right, and he should have been, and to be clear, Rex did make the rounds. He just never really made it into like any of the competitive tiers. And I think the thing is with him, you looked at that ability, you're like, man, constant control of the battlefield. We had Bindus come out in the same set as him. There was a lot of stuff that on paper really should have worked, but Rex was just never really able to quite pop into I think where we expected him to be. Next, number 13, I have Way of the Force Dooku. So this guy's expensive, right? No question about it. And yes, there was a Dooku Talzin deck for a bit, kind of on the fringes of the Way of the Force meta, kind of at the tail end of the Way of the Force meta. But it was never really making major waves. But this guy's ability to come in and do what he's doing, regardless really of what his die sides are, is pretty good. And especially, we only had 5 sets out at the time. There's pretty good potential here, but it's just he never really quite made it in with his price point, which I think makes sense. If we look back at the history, I think that's kind of a consistent theme we'll see here, is not necessarily that his price point was bad, it's just that his price point put him in a rough spot with partners. And I think really the only person we ever really truly saw him with was Talzin, for lots of flipping, and then you were playing odds, and then the deck kind of had its own problems, right? So Dooku should have really been pretty good on paper. I do think that 1 focus is what hurt him a lot. If he'd had that 2 focus, probably would have changed the game, quite literally, but maybe a 2 focus and a 1 shield or something like that. But he was pretty decent. Had a lot of fun with him on various testing stuff, but again, he never really broke into the meta, I think, the way a lot of people thought that he could have. Number 12, so I realize there's people who may disagree with me on this one, but Infus Nest, right? Infus Nest I have on this list because what Infus could potentially, again, we saw, Infus decks to various extents. Again, I'm talking FFG era. Once she got bumped to 17, it kind of changed things significantly. But with her at the 18, with like the no allegiance thing, we saw some people playing around with it. It just wasn't phenomenal. Remember also 3 wides were in the era with her of Padme Bouche, right? Which I was eating 3 wides alive with that, right? So, but Infus's ability to bring off faction cards was strong, right? And remember, it could be off color too, right? So because those include 2 villain cards and up to 2 hero cards in your deck following other deck. Oh, so it wasn't off color. I don't know what I was thinking. It was not. That's why I had to reread that. I was like, it doesn't sound right. Yeah. But either way, being able to bring off faction cards was potentially huge, right? There was some Mega Blaster. I think that was the big one with the hero decks, was to bring Mega Blasters. But you guys get it. She never really... there's a lot of potential with her there to be able to get lots of money. There were some ramp decks that we saw early, kind of later on with once a Reap and stuff like that came out. We did see some Infus ramp decks, but again, she never really punched into that FFG era top tier like I think many of us expected her to, or at least were very excited about the ability when it was first spoiled. Number 11 is Savage. Savage, I think everybody knew when it was spoiled he was going to have challenges in terms of, the activation thing. But on the flip side, he was an 11-14 with 13 health with 4 damage sides. And just to put it in perspective, his die has been reused for the ARH stuff and was pretty good. Now, granted, on a character with a slightly different health point, or entry point, but also had only 9 health, right? And that character's done a lot of work in various decks. Of course, being Apprentice doesn't hurt as well. But this Savage, I think, again, this was Way of the Force when he came out. And, back then, something like this was pretty massive. And I think a lot of people tried to make Savage work and just couldn't quite do it. So he never quite made it in there, but certainly I think a lot of us thought he had potential in the beginning. Number 10 is ATG, Across the Galaxy, Lando. This guy did see a little bit of play in a mild, kind of at the end of that meta. Was it that meta? No, it would have been... Yeah, I think it was at the end of that meta. Maybe even... No, it was Convergence because of No Answer, right? But there was a while there where there was a Lando Leia deck going on using his 4 as the mill side on Leia's PA. It was okay. It was never super great, right? Because you could reap to it, right? You could reap to it PA, and right. So you guys get it. But he, that his whole potential of dropping. I know Mike worked really hard to get him to work with yellow vehicles, but yellow vehicles weren't really there. Aside from the Big Falcon, the vehicles weren't really there to support him. You were stuck playing like that. What was it? The blockade runner. The 2-drop yellow tie, the black guild mining tie, that was it, right? So that was out. You ended up having to use stuff like that, which wasn't even that good. It's just you were using it for the L vehicles. Anyway, so he just never quite. He's somebody who had a lot of potential and just never quite made it based on the card pool and the other stuff out at the time. Just never quite pushed through. Number 9, Master Smuggler. So I think this is my only non-unique on this list. This guy's I've always been surprised at how little play this guy has seen across the board. This guy's ability to make money is pretty good. The 1013 price point for 10 health, 1013 for 2 dice, coming in and guaranteeing you usually a money, or sometimes 2 if you've got it to pay. This guy I'm really surprised never saw more. But again, I think it was just that thing that there were better options. There was no real good deck with it. The 3-wide Smugglers deck was just kind of too slow and too clunky, even though it was unbelievable health and made a boatload of money. It just never really worked. But I always thought that just him as a 10-13, because that's a really good price point, I always thought him in that range was good. Now, I think one of the things that hurt him was you never really wanted to play him single die, because if he single died in and blanked, then the whole point of playing him kind of went away. So you usually wanted him elite at that 10-13. But yeah, Again, this is somebody who came out, I was like, man, this guy's going to be really, really good. And like I said, I tried a lot to make him work, and he did okay. Even look at him with like someone like Ahsoka. Like, why isn't there a, Ahsoka, and I'm talking RDM, or I'm talking high stakes Ahsoka, right? Like Ahsoka, like that should be a pretty decent deck, right? And it just hasn't really worked because there's always just been better options and other places to go look. Number 8 is Dameron, and I think this kind of fits in earlier to, my 15 and 14 were Rex and Finn, and there were decks that tried those guys with him as well. His power action here is really scary, right, if it could work. Part of the problem is it just never really did, right? And I do think part of the problem here is that it was the trooper dice, so you couldn't result, like even if you had like a +3 gun, right? Because there was that gun that came out, I think, of Spark of Hope that was trooper focused, and like if it was on a trooper, it was +1, real scary. But again, with this PA, you couldn't resolve it. So, which is probably a good thing overall, because like just going in and resolving all your dice would be bonkers good, right? But that's really what hurt him. I mean, really only some of the modifier, any upgrade you gave him, you couldn't resolve. A300 had modifier, Rex's pistol had modifier. Really the only thing you had with him you could resolve fundamentally was the conscript. And even the AT-RT was phenomenal for troopers, but wouldn't work, right? So that was Kess's main problem. But again, you look at that and you're like, man, this should be really good. I can just roll in, resolve all my dice, claim on a good effect, get the hell out of Dodge, have the battlefield. On paper it was really good, but just never quite executed. Number 7, you guys know I played the snot out of Tarful in the late CM meta, the early COVID meta, right, when we were playing on TTS all the time. It was Ayla, Tarful, Tribe. I played, and that was back when Ayla was 13, I played the snot out of this guy. He's good. Again, he's one of these guys who's really good on paper. The Wookiee thing with him never really worked because he had to stay alive, and he was generally first target anyway. That 2 focus is no joke. Again, everything on paper about this guy is amazing. He just never quite made it in, just based on kind of how the partners were and the meta was at the time, which is too bad because I really, really liked Tarful Tribe. I really, really did. All right, number 6 harkens back to, again, kind of a points balancing problem, I think. Saw Gerrera. There were jank decks all over the place trying to abuse this guy's special, doing high-cost cards, taking your own card out of your hand. At the time, remember, we did have Cunning that people were trying to use. We had Yoda. That was kind of the jank deck there, was Saw Yoda. But again, we're talking jank. Saw never really made it into anywhere. Saw never really made it anywhere close. There was the Padme Saw deck that a lot of people played in early Convergence, with the potential just massive indirect there. All in had rotated. We had Impulsive. All in had rotated out, which probably hurt that deck, which is probably good. But him at that 16 price point, right? If he had been at 15, the Saw Wedge, right? Legacies Wedge, Saw Wedge would have been really, really scary growth, probably, especially back in the day. So it's probably a good thing that he was at 16 overall, but he just never, at that 16, he just eliminated too many potential partners. All the once you were going into that, there was why wouldn't you just run 2 partisans, right? I mean, that was kind of his problem from the beginning, is unless you're trying to abuse his special, you may as well just run 2 partisans and put pressure on other ways. And partisans were really freaking good, by the way. All right, number 5 is Kit Fisto. I tried a lot. If you guys recall back when Amy was playing, she was very into Blue Hero. That was kind of her jam. We tried a lot to get Kit Fisto to work. There were Solidarity. We tried Solidarity a bit. Tried Biddle Rivalry. I think that was one we ended up being on the most with Master Luke. Kit's ability to just tank and stay alive. And I mean, look at his dice, right? 1, 2, 3 for 1, 2 focus, money, 16 points. This guy was probably fairly costed. It's just where he was kind of tough with the other blue heroes out there. Because you had a lot of 15s, right? You had Rey. Again, at the time, right? You had Rey, you had Master Luke. I know a bit of Rivalry, I think. No, that was Way of the Force. Yeah, so you had Ayla, but then that didn't quite math out because Ayla was 13 at that point. So then you were looking at a 2-point plot, and there weren't really any good ones until Convergence came out. And anyway, you guys kind of see it, right? This guy should have been potentially fantastic on paper. But there was, and people really did try. The people really did try to make him work. I saw a lot of decks playing him, but they never really popped into, I think, where we thought Kit probably could have been. All right, number 4. This one's kind of a personal one for me. Is Pong Krell. Again, I think it kind of fits into the Infus Nest thing. Is once you can start doing cross faction stuff, things in theory can really go good for you, really quick, right? There's potentially a lot of power there to be able to bring in those cards. But Pong Krell, I think, because he was probably limited to the 1, which, again, was probably a good thing. But I think that's what kind of kept him out. And, again, he was kind of in the... 15's not a bad spot, but it was kind of a weird spot for him to be in. And just with where Villain was at that time, he just never kind of became anything. I know there was a lot of, he saw most of his play in Faltering Allegiances, actually trying to pair with Vader or Terran Malicos, stuff like that. But he never really made it. The Vader Terran was better, right? And it just the way it was. All right, number 3 is Mauler Mythal. Mauler Mythal, again, so this was ATG when he came out. And this guy's pretty phenomenal, right? And putting it, look at him now compared to a Wedge or something, it's not. But back then, a 9/12, right? Because we had a lot of 18-point characters back then, right? And a 9/12 with 9 health and 3 damage sides was pretty good. Plus he could blow up ships, which in ATG, again, that was the whole point of that set. Mauler Mythal, I think, we did see Iden Mauler, and... the red plot that lets you pull Armored Reinforcement. Sorry, jeez, I don't know where my head was. All right. Anyway, Iden Mauler and Armored Reinforcement, we did see that deck. I think that was about it. For Mauler. But he should have been a lot better than he was. It's just, again, it's just kind of the way things worked out of that meta. That was the Vader Greedo Snoke meta, right? And there was just better stuff to play, and he just never quite made it in. All right, number 2 is Zeb. Now, this one comes with a bit of a disclaimer of Zeb was actually really strong in Trilogy, Legacies Trilogy, right? Yoda Zeb was one of, I'd say the top 4 decks in the Trilogy format when Legacies came out. But Zeb, look at him, right? 17 points, which was okay. 12 health, which was really good at the time. And his dice could be resolved to either side. It was when this guy came out. This was a phenomenal. You look at this, you're like, oh my god, there's so much potential here. It's off the charts. One of the people you could play with him was Ayla. Part of the problem with Ayla was she couldn't flip Zeb's dice, right? Because she was blue or red, and I do think that hurt. So Zeb Yoda was really the only thing we saw, and there was, once you moved out of Legacies and kind of into the standard format, there was just better stuff out there. Again, his potential, on paper, this guy at the time should have been phenomenal. And when he got bumped down to 14 later on, he saw quite a bit of play. But even so, never really made it into Tier 1 because a lot of times he was being still paired with another person that was 16 or 15. But this guy, again, had a lot of fun with Zeb. I loved the card. I loved the design. He just never really quite made it where I think when he was spoiled, because that's why this image doesn't have a die on it, is it was a spoiled image. When he was spoiled, a lot of us were like, whoa, this guy's going to be phenomenal. And never quite met those expectations. All right. Number 1, to the chagrin of people everywhere, I know a lot of people, Mike included, tried to get this guy to work. Sidious Palpatine, also from Legacies. This guy, he was just the reality is he was just overcosted for where he was. But in theory, what this guy could have done was really, really scary back in the day, right? So he had the mixed damage sides, which you would think hurt him, but it actually helped him for his power action to be able to play the big events. A lot of people put a lot of work into making this guy work, not just back in that meta, but in metas that followed, because he also, I believe he got a points adjustment. Maybe not. But Palpatine Gamorrean Guard was kind of a deck going around. But again, it had too many problems because it was roll dependent and draw dependent. That's everything in Destiny. I get it. But he was more heavily on that because his mixed damage sides, you did actually have to leave them out in order to play the card that you wanted. And if you got the card you wanted and you didn't roll right, you were stuck. If you rolled great but you didn't get the card you wanted, you were stuck. And there were just too many problems with him at that price point. To be honest, he probably could have worked even in the day, maybe as a 19-point character. Either way, this guy I think goes down in the number 1 slot of wow, this could be phenomenal, but just never really worked. And like I said, there's a lot of people I know that tried to get this guy to work. He hit the table a lot of times. I played against him a lot of times, and sometimes he was brutal, but he just wasn't consistent enough to do what people wanted him to do. So anyway, that finishes off my list. Like I said, just kind of looking back to the FFG days and having some fun with some of the stuff that I tried to make work and couldn't over the years, and stuff I saw other people. And anyway, so let me know in the comments below, and hopefully you've been typing as we've been going through this. What are some characters that you thought were going to be really, really fantastic when they came out, and just for whatever reason never really made it. And I'm talking FFG, and remember, let's think original points, because that was the point, right? You'd open up that FFG spoiler article, you'd read it, be like, oh my god, this guy's gonna be amazing. It was first deck he threw together, and it just right. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me. I am curious to hear what you guys have to say, and if nothing else, folks, go Commando.